Thanks so much. Thanks for everybody dialing in. I see there are 83 attendees and great panel today, folks. Lots of different backgrounds. Really excited. We kind of have a split conversation here around, what can we do better today, given all these technology enhancements that are out there. And how do we think about the future looking ahead, 5, 10, 15 years. So we have an incredible panel of folks that obviously can hopefully speak to all those opportunities. I'm the CEO, been here about 4.5 years, long background in transportation, spent time at a management consulting firm, and then was at US DOT before and ran a toll road as well. So hopefully you've seen all angles of this opportunity around smart roads. Really want to thank ITS America. Our colleague Chris, my colleague Chris Armstrong, is the new chair of ITS America. Really excited about that. But ITS America has obviously been a great partner to those looking to innovate in the road space, and really thank them for letting us host this. So why don't we go around, do some quick intros from the panel. On my screen, we're going to work from the right with Greg, and then Andy, and then Gopi, and then Lori.
Great. Thank you, Tyler. Greg Slater, Executive Director and CEO of the Tampa Hills and the Expressway Authority. I came here in 2022, early 2022, after a 25-year career in the Maryland DOT. Approaching kind of 3 decades in this industry and in this business, a variety of functions. Focused a lot of my career on the highway side. Early in my career, a lot on the technology side, the analytics, the data, and a lot of the technology that we're seeing today. Ended my career in Maryland working on all modes of transportation, from aviation to maritime to toll roads to transit systems, and really came to FIA in 2022 as they were really looking for someone to come in, take the strong foundation of an organization, push our connected vehicle pilot forward, and really set the foundation for how we build this transportation system for the next generation here in Tampa. So happy to be here, happy to jump in on this conversation, and just thank you to ITS America and Cavnue for having us.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Andy?
Hey everyone, Andy Sussman. Nice to meet you all. I'm on the business development team at Forterra. Forterra is a level 4 autonomous vehicle company. We're a dual-use company to work with the Department of Defense on military vehicles. And then the side of the house that I sit on is commercial logistics. So you can think of this as terminal tractors, yard trucks, moving trailers outside of warehouses, logistics centers, deep water ports, railheads, etc. I've been at Forterra for about 1.5 years. Prior to that, I spent a year in over-the-road autonomous trucking at a company called M-Trucks. And prior to that, almost a decade in management consulting focused on future of mobility, specifically autonomous vehicles. So thanks for having us, Cavnue and ITS.
Good. Thanks, Andy. Gopi? You're still muted, Gopi.
Sorry for that. Hi, everyone. Gopi Surmila here, I'm President of Intelligence, so just my own company. But before this work, I was working at Ford for about 30 years, working in various technology development, research and development in powertrain, ADAS, connectivity, and primarily focused on safety and mobility is where I was towards the end. So currently, I'm focused on developing solutions, literally in like defining technical strategy and connectivity solutions. So this topic is absolutely exciting to talk about. And where I'm seeing is, as we move forward, I think the whole world is connected. I think one place we are seeing is like, okay, the infrastructure connectivity and delivering some of those kind of things to people. So that's what is exciting about, hey, how do we connect the remaining parts of the world that is not connected and deliver to the people? So
Great. Thanks, Gopi. And just full disclosure, Ford is an investor in Cavnue, and when Gopi was at Ford, he was our kind of lead technical collaborator around everything that automobiles needed to get intelligence off the roadway. So that's why when we said we got to do this panel, we said Gopi's got to be on this. So thanks, Gopi, for joining. Okay. Over to you, Lori.
Thanks so much, Tyler. So this past March, I joined STV to lead the mobility technologies team in the southeastern and central regions of the U.S. However, because we're a small nationwide team, we all work beyond our regional borders. So I also work with clients out in Washington State and California. And my clients represent both the public and private sectors who are interested in integrating these technologies into their systems. And we help them from the policy, programmatic sides, as well as the technical work. And so prior to joining STV, I was the Deputy Secretary for Innovative Mobility Solutions at the California State Transportation Agency, where I work to apply technology and best practices to the transportation ecosystem in the state of California. And before that, I worked for Honda, leading their federal technology and innovation policy portfolio. And I tell you all that because I want you to see that from my previous jobs and as I work with clients in my current job, understanding real time or as close to real time as possible state of the roads and traffic helps to manage the system in the most efficient manner possible for both road users and owner operators. And the information gained from that data being discussed here today is critical to the outcomes that our clients want to achieve. Everything from increased safety on the roads, reduced congestion, developing electrification strategies for both fleets and general public, emergency response, and other things. And so I'm really excited about the renewed focus on V2X by the USDOT and the FCC. It's a welcome development for a technology that we know has a very real potential to save lives. And so coupling V2X with coordinated digital infrastructure efforts at FHWA creates a very powerful structure to gather, disseminate, analyze, and use smart road intelligence. And so I look forward to discussing how we can all work together to maximize the impact of the data.
Great. Thanks, Lori. By the way, Kathy, make sure to capture that quote for the Cavnue LinkedIn site. Every word that she just said, please post that immediately. Anyway, so a great panel, obviously incredibly diverse background, by the way, of experiences, public, private companies, roadways, technology companies. So, I mean, this is obviously why we selected this panel, but I think it's quite unique to assemble this diversity on a single panel. So hopefully we have a good conversation here. Please change the slide because this picture of me is really goofy and we need to move on to the next slide. All right. So look, we kind of have this, at Cavnue, we have these kind of three problem statements that we started the company around. One is cars are really getting a lot smarter. Trucks are getting smarter. Obviously, with Andy and Gopi here, they can validate that. A lot smarter today than they were 5 years ago. Massively smarter than they were 10 or 15 years ago. And that evolution, the S curve, so to speak, is starting to accelerate again. Obviously, the hype cycle around vehicles has come and gone in various ways, but we're now at a moment, I think, where acceleration is about to really ramp up again. But the roadways have really stayed the same. We can talk to our parents, our relatives who drove in the 60s and 70s, and there are a lot of things that are better about roadways today, but it doesn't feel as different as the vehicle experience does. And so, in our view, roadways have not kept up with the innovation as much as the vehicles have, and we're about to see again a wave of technology coming into vehicles. So that's the first problem statement. The second one, in our view, is that the technology that has been deployed, while it's great at responding to very specific issues, has not really brought the breadth of coverage of technology to allow all kinds of different use cases, to allow people like Greg to intervene on the roadway, to allow other people who operate roadways to do different things to manage safety and traffic. And so the scale of deployments have been more limited and more surgical than we think is necessary to really help firms like Andy's and where Gopi used to work, et cetera. And then the third point is, roadways are not all the same. We all know that. We've got arterials, we got limited access roadways, we got urbanized environments. But, the reality is the risk profile of roadways is very diverse. You see very high speed corridors coming out of COVID that experience huge increases in fatalities and crashes. You see other roadway environments, particularly some of these arterials, where speeds have grown a lot and the current safety countermeasures have not worked that well. So our view at Cavnue is that we need a kind of a risk-based approach to target these technology solutions, that it's not a one-size-fits-all problem and that all roadways will not benefit the same way. So those are the kind of three problem statements that we've got. If we go to the next slide, Kathy. These critical corridors that we're seeing are basically targeted towards where you see the biggest chunk of VMT, the biggest amount of crashes, and obviously the biggest population. So that's about 7,300 miles. Many of us know these interstate statistics where it's like 1% of total lane miles, but 25% of VMT. National highway system similarly carrying over half the overall VMT in the U.S. So this kind of targeting around these critical high-speed corridors that are carrying huge amounts of commerce, where a lot of the growth is happening in the United States, and frankly, where a lot of the fatalities, unfortunately, are happening. In addition to the urbanized environments, our view need much more attention. So most of the ITS, again, there's some exceptions to this, so don't be offended if your company is working on something that's consistent with, or inconsistent with what I'm about to say, but most of the ITS solutions are really targeted towards a lot of the urbanized environments. And of course, we need much more attention to pedestrians and vulnerable road users in those environments. But these kinds of corridors, in our view, have gotten far too little attention from a technology perspective. So the reason we assembled this panel was really to kind of explore how technology in these kinds of environments can help vehicles, can help road operators, et cetera. So why don't we get into it a little bit here. I wanted each panelist to provide a little bit of context for kind of what they're working on, and obviously probing on this initial problem statement. So we'll start with Greg. I know, having talked to Greg recently, they're clearly one of the fastest growing and most innovative authorities in the country. Very unique setup, generating massive amounts of revenue. But Greg obviously is a technology leader in transportation way before he went to Tampa. So I'd love to hear Greg talk a little bit about how technology is changing his operation.
Absolutely, Tyler. Really kind of great thinking about that from like a value proposition perspective. So for several years now, Thea has been pretty active working with both local, state, but also federal agencies on the technology side. From a historical perspective, we did a test. Audi came out and did some automated vehicle testing in 2014. We were one of the 2020 pilots for USDOT. We did some signal interference testing for USDOT in 2022. And just a few months back, we were out in Wyoming testing some new V2X technology, as well as some new CB applications to be able to apply to our system. From a value proposition perspective, we start with safety and that maximum return on investment. You touched a little bit on the growth that we're seeing. Kathy, if you could go to the next slide, a little bit about our connected vehicle pilot. Oh, no, one more. What? There we go. Thank you. And then, we really had an in-depth system in and around downtown. And so we're seeing tremendous growth in Florida. And of course, increased traffic comes with safety challenges on top of that. So, our population is growing and it's felt every day. So you look at a recent study, we like to follow the data with our deployment of technology. So 26% of the crashes in Florida are related to intersections. 32% of those lead to an injury or death. 24% of those fatal crashes at intersections or vulnerable road users. You compare that to 2019, we're up 13-14%. So our vulnerable road user fatal crashes have been increasing. That's 7 to 8% every year. And 84% of the crashes at the intersections involving vulnerable road users really are leading to an injury or death in Florida. So why does an expressway authority like mine, who really traverses an urban area and some rural areas, need to focus on V2X? And it's because the data and the playing field dictate it. And so if you could change the next slide, you'll see how our playing field in Tampa has changed over the last 10 years, really taking an urban environment that has really grown up around our expressway and created an environment for us. So we had a dense urban environment with high-speed expressway ramps kind of feeding into it. So we really needed to rethink the whole function there. So those trends, from that USF study are really consistent with what we're seeing in Tampa. So we're leaning hard on the advancements on V2X in the downtown core, and then leaning on some of the other technologies on the outside to really focus on that transition from expressway to urban systems. At the end of the day, you think about, and Tyler touched on this a little bit, 40,000 people are getting killed on our transportation system nationally every year. Completely preventable with a little bit more care and data. After that, the smarter the system is, the more connected the system is, the more adaptable the system is, the safer it is. So when we're looking at advancements in analytics, we're looking at it from a life safety perspective, whether it's V2V saving lives or V2X. We're looking to push forward in those advancements, which is why we put ourselves out there as a pilot to deploy and prove all kinds of tech. When you look at our connected vehicle pilot, you look at the results of that. Over the course of that pilot, we prevented 38 potential crashes, 21 pedestrian safety incidents, 14 wrong-way drivers. We had a wrong-way driver fatality last weekend. 14 wrong-way driver crashes prevented in our pilot program, along with 5,200 advisory messages to our participants. And so, that's been our pivot. When we started our pilot, we had really made some assumptions on how the auto manufacturing industry was going to advance in terms of their technology, and that didn't go as fast as we had originally thought. So what we did was we took a step back and said, okay, we're going to focus on providing our customers, our participants, with the most amount of information that we can so that they can make safe decisions. And so today we're focused on that same thing, but also from a system and data perspective. So if you go into the next slide, Kathy. So implementing that system across our region, from a project perspective, our focus is, of course, on safety and maximum efficiency. But with a mixed fleet on our system right now, we have this simple focus on trying to provide that maximum amount of information to make those smart decisions. So as the fleet evolves, we're going to be able to take away more of those human factors, but the tech on our system that we're building today is going to allow us to take advantage of it as it becomes available. The foundational piece there. So we're focused on that foundation. We've got an I-4 frame project today where we're working with units and integrating roadside units and CV technology, connecting our system to Orlando through the I-4 corridor in partnership with FDEC. So a full connected corridor between Tampa and Orlando. We've got a multimodal ITS project, a partnership with USDOT and University of Arizona, looking at deceleration of ramps and pedestrian safety at the end of ramps. It's really about working on those few spillbacks. So as you're getting into a dense urban environment, you're slowing the traffic down, but you're also kind of queuing back on the ramp. So we want to warn the drivers that are on the expressway and kind of interconnect them. We have an exit ramp safety project we're working on right now where we're putting detection in the crosswalks at the base of our ramp and connecting that detection to signage and information at the top of the ramp to be able to communicate those things that are happening. And then we've got our vulnerable road user project that we're really looking at how do we connect into scooters and bikes and those types of things. And then for the first time, we just got some positive results from that where we're using our roadside units to calculate travel times to feed to the vehicles and our vehicle message boards so that we can balance the traffic between our reversible express lane and our local system underneath of it. So really trying to use the system, the technology, and the analytics to operate the system, but looking at it from a variety of fronts from both a safety and an operational perspective in maximizing the use and the efficiency of our system at the same time.
Great. Awesome, Greg. I'm gonna have a couple of meta questions to the panel, and I'll do kind of a wrap up of like how I think our system fits into what each of you is doing. That's why I flipped the order. I didn't tell Kathy I was flipping the order, but I wanted to hear from everybody before I, talked about how great Cavnue is. But why don't we move down the panel and just to preview, one of my meta questions is going to be really, do we feel like we need, so-called operating system for technology on roadways versus these kind of more targeted solutions around problems that are popping up everywhere. And I guess my hypothesis is that we need a more systemic solution that which we can build capabilities on top of, and that we have kind of instead focused a little bit too much as a country on problem over here, run over here, versus building these core technology capabilities across the board. So that's my hypothesis. We'll debate whether I'm right or not. But why don't we go to Andy?
Perfect. Well, thank you, Tyler. So Forterra, as I mentioned, we're a level 4 autonomous vehicle company. And what that means is that we're building a full hardware software stack for driver out autonomous operations. We partner with vehicle OEMs. So Kalmar is a big yard truck manufacturer, the largest yard truck manufacturer in the world. Mack Trucks, you can see here for our Class 8 partnership. So we partner with OEMs and add our autonomous vehicle stack onto the base vehicles to make them fully capable of driving without a human in the cab. I think I speak for most of the autonomous vehicle industry when I say because there isn't a standardized V2X sensor suite across the country or in all of the places that we're operating, we've had to build our technology stack assuming that the only inputs we get are from the sensors on the vehicle. And so we're using sensor fusion across LiDAR, radar, cameras, GPS units, et cetera, to perceive the world around us, to detect and avoid obstacles, to classify the things that we're seeing and path plan. All that said, more data is always beneficial, and there's a lot of use cases where getting V2X data or getting smart road data would be tremendously helpful for our vehicles as they're perceiving the world and path planning and planning missions for moving trailers or doing the other autonomous movements that we do. So I put a couple pictures here, but I'd love to talk through some of the challenges that I've seen at real customer deployments over the past little while. So the bottom left picture, that's a railhead outside of Detroit, Michigan. It's about a mile from the end of the rail line. Trailers are brought from that railhead to this drop lot and stored at the drop lot for 1 to 3 days before they're brought to their final destination. We do a valet model at this drop lot where the human drivers drop the trailers off, and then we park the trailers and then bring them back and forth between the railhead and the drop lot. It's a not great area of Detroit, Livernois Avenue, for anyone who's familiar, outside of Dearborn. About a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit between that railhead and our drop lot. And one day we were pulling a trailer out, and a Lamborghini drove by at probably 80 to 100 miles an hour. I'm not going to hypothesize why there was a Lamborghini speeding in that part of Detroit. That's not my role, but that is not something our sensors were necessarily calibrated to look out for. We did perceive the object, but we were, the compute was a bit confused of what it should be looking for, what that object was, because we'd never seen an object going that fast at that speed on that road. So getting a heads up from some V2X capability would have been really helpful and would have enabled a less dangerous interaction. Luckily, nothing happened in that incident. We were out of the way of the vehicle, but you can imagine something could happen and it could be catastrophic. And as we think about autonomous vehicles, safety is kind of paramount, and we move at the speed of our safety case. And some of the peers in the industry have experienced edge cases that led to a tragedy, and that often shuts down the autonomous vehicle company. Whether you think about Cruise recently or Uber ATG, they both encountered edge cases, and that was ultimately the start of shutting down that company. That's not something we want to be doing. I think it's not something our peers in the autonomous vehicle industry want to be doing. So quick other examples on some of the other pictures. Snow and weather, it obviously can be very challenging for our sensors. Typically, the way we and other autonomous vehicle companies handle weather is you can tune the inputs from different sensors. So radar sees further, but in less fidelity than LiDAR, which is closer but higher fidelity. You can start to tune those, but you're losing some granularity. And so getting additional data from other sensors out external to the vehicle and perhaps further away is definitely beneficial. And then things like intersections in the bottom right, that is an intersection where we saw construction equipment cutting across the road. Not necessarily something we would expect to see, but did see it a few times when we drove past that intersection. So again, getting that real-time data from infrastructure is certainly something that could be incredibly helpful. So happy to continue the conversation, happy to give more examples of weird things we've seen on the road. But fundamentally, I think the takeaway for me is that one edge case that you're not expecting is kind of the most dangerous thing for an autonomous vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, obviously you all have been great company, great partners, stars, and I think really, I guess I have a more of a direct question, not that you need to debate colleagues in your industry, but there seems to be this kind of conversation around, do you need additional information? And I've always thought that's not really the right question. The question is, could you benefit from additional information? And why do you think the industry, not you all, but why is generally the L4 world so averse, in my observation, to engaging in this question in a more public forum? Obviously, we deal with a lot of engineers who are like, yeah, it would be good to know that piece of information. But why is it such a hard thing to say, you know what? Yes, this is helpful to know this.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't want to speak for the industry as a whole, but I think generally autonomy is a really hard problem, and there are a lot of things to be solved in autonomy. And I think a lot of companies in the space are the way they fundraised and the way they're hiring, they're incentivized to get to market quickly. And so by publicly talking about barriers, it adds doubt for investors, adds doubt for employees, et cetera. So I think you framed it exactly right, Tyler. Is it needed? Maybe not. Is it beneficial? 1000% yes. And again, eliminating edge cases is kind of the key to autonomy. And it is absolutely a key way to eliminate use case or edge
Yeah, I mean,
cases.
the analogy I would always use is like, yes, we don't need guardrails. We don't necessarily need lights. By the way, I'm not even sure we need pavement. We had dirt roads. So technically, it's all about optimization. It's all about efficiency and reducing risk. And I love your comments, and we'll come back to you here on the panel. Why don't we go over to Gopi?
Thank you, Andy. I think that was a nice intro to what I want to talk about, actually. So, Kathy, if you could just go to one slide. Yes. So this is the way I see this whole system of sensing as, right? How are we driving now? So in the middle is the sight. That's the vision part of it, right? Human drivers, we use our eyes and then say it's like, okay, let's drive on the road, and we are able to use our eyes in whatever it is with some help from some of the sensing systems. And then the vehicles, we just took the same thing. We said, okay, let's put all these vision systems like the way person sees and do it. And then if you see on the left side, I call it the foresight. What does the human driver do? Okay, they use their sight, but then there is the cognition of the humans. We use it to understand the environment much better than the sensors do, in a way, and then our own experience, and be able to determine some of the corner cases, right? Like Andy was bringing up, the corner cases we try to estimate. Not that otherwise, if we are perfect as humans in that part, there would not have been any accidents in human drivers, but it's not the case. So still we are imperfect, but still we try to do that. From the vehicle sensor side, there is no robust mechanism to see that kind of scenarios. For example, like non-line of sight scenarios, things that are not visible, some right are in the horizon or things like that. So as we move forward, I think there is a need for us to be able to provide that kind of information, what a driver would need or an autonomous vehicle would need, right? I always pose this question. It's like, hey, what's the difference between a 16-year-old and somebody with a 16 years experience driving? It's just like, okay, let's take the vision. They have a much better vision than I do, right? I have a lot of experience driving, but they have much better vision than I do. But still, if I ask someone, they say, I'll sit in my car than my 16-year-old, really, right? So what is that, right? That they experience, and that's the cognition part of it. So we should be able to bring our autonomous vehicle to be able to drive like an experienced driver, a perfect driver, and better than that, right? That's what we're targeting. So what is that information that is needed essentially? And one of the key information that I see is needed is that the information that is ahead, right? I call it the far sight information. So for improving both the human drivers and automated vehicles, you need to go past that, the line of sight information, provide information about what's going on in the road conditions, so that none of these situations about, right, an accident on the road are, if you could go to the next slide, please. Right. If you look at these scenarios, right, there is some debris on the road, or there's a stopped vehicle which is protruding into there, or some accident ahead. This is the information that doesn't need to be an emergency information, right? You don't need to come to that situation to determine that, oh my God, that has happened, and so let me take some action. That could have been an information that you have communicated to the people, to the vehicle. So I think the ecosystem is building up, and right, the first thing that we needed was the vehicles and people, right, the drivers are connected. We got that. We got the vehicles are all, almost every vehicle that's made now is a connected vehicle, in the sense that you can send the information in, and every driver has a phone or whatever, they are connected. I think what's missing is the infrastructure. That I think car is waiting to receive the information. People are waiting with their phones to receive the information in the vehicle in some way, but we don't have a ability to provide the right information to the right people yet. We're doing it. Do we need that information to say that there is an accident ahead? Yes, we do. We determined that. We actually put boards on the side, right, saying it's like, there's accident ahead. Watch out, right? There's a big board. We determined that, but of course, that's not the perfect way to give that information of all the situations that are happening. I think what is needed now is to be able to make that infrastructure smarter, whatever that means, and then in various forms, right? I mean, it's like, I know Cavnue is looking at the different technology aspects of it. And however you might be able to create that information about the situation to give that situation awareness that is ahead and make these vehicles smarter and a non-emergency reaction way, right? I think there's a lot of the time we have been actually looking at safety as a linear line, right? We said first, if somebody gets into a collision, let's save them. Then we moved into somebody is getting into a collision, let's break them. And then we wanted to see if somebody is about to get into a collision, let's warn them in the last moment. Or the other end part would have been if there is somebody that could get into an emergency situation, we provide that information. I say we don't need to be on a linear line. Get to the end. Actually, you should, if you are able to provide the information, that all the 1, 2, 3 are not necessarily, right? So just let's see how we can provide that information in this connected world and make that infrastructure safer. So.
Yeah, Gopi, I mean, is your sense that the OEMs, and Lori, I'm going to ask you this too, but I mean, given your background, I mean, is your sense the OEMs are increasingly embracing this idea that, called look ahead information around roadway hazards and environments is they're more interested in it than they were, say 5 years ago?
So I think they are interested, but then the OEMs are also looking at the business element of it, right, Tyler? I think we need to be, there is this catch-22 going on. It's like, hey, I will provide that information into the vehicle. Will the driver pay for it? Yes, the driver is paying, will pay for it, maybe pay for it. But if you are able to provide it comprehensively, right? Don't tell me, hey, on highway 9, on I-10, in between this mile and this mile, I'm going to provide you that information. And would you subscribe for that, right? Generally, that becomes, so we need to, it comes to the point of being able to comprehensively provide and the drivers sees the value in it, right? So I think that we need to comprehensively provide that so that it makes business case. And then I think the OEMs are going to come and embrace that is what happens.
Great. Awesome. All right, Lori, you've got great background, obviously, with industry, with government, and now obviously consulting, advising all over the place. So I'd love to hear your take on all this, and then I'll ask you a question.
Yeah. So the clients I think about when I think about kind of all the information that the companies on this panel really kind of bring to them. We have clients like the airports, the cities, the universities, the transit agencies, and others. They're all interested in modernizing and being much more efficient in how people and goods move throughout their area of ownership or authority. And they want to be able to accommodate increased operational growth or achieve strategic goals, just to name a couple. And so we're also looking at how to connect the information that our clients receive from vehicles, from roadways, outside of their more immediate universe. So transportation officials are increasingly partnering with energy and climate officials, technology and broadband officials, offices of emergency services to provide the transportation and mobility piece of supporting their goals and vice versa. And so we have been talking a lot about creating data exchanges with more of our clients as a solution than ever before. And so creating a repository that all appropriate actors can retrieve, analyze, and use to make smart decisions. But we also need to trust that data. And so, companies such as yours and others, we know that it's accurate. We understand what it represents or when it represents, right? Is it real time, previous moment in time, et cetera. And then able to move into a decision-making phase, which could also include a predictive algorithm. So all these pieces are important to support the decision-making in order to ensure that our roadways and everything else are safer and that we're and more reliable for all of us. And so really the undercurrent of everything is that coordination and collaboration between both public and private sector partners in order to empower them to best serve their constituents and customers.
Great. And Lori, what is your sense of like the way your clients are thinking? Kathy, can you throw like the first image of the kind of Cavnue platform? Like, what is your sense, Lori, of why people are not kind of systematically thinking about technology? They're not buying it kind of in more innovative ways, or is your sense that they're interested, they just are just learning still?
There's an interest. I do want to go back to the question you posed to Gopi because I
Yeah.
do agree with everything he said. I just want to add on that when I was at Honda, one of the challenges, of course, was we were still, arguing within the industry DSRC versus CV to X, right? We had kind of these internal internal discussions versus external getting the spectrum. And now we're at a really interesting point in time where the FCC has provided its second report and order, and the US DOT has had their V2X summit and talking about their integration plan. And it feels like now we're kind of perched on being able to actually act and have some sort of certainty as far as spectrum and where we can um, use a lot of these features. So there has definitely been interest, but because so many other things were uncertain, now that we have certainty, I think we'll see increased use and increased vocal interest
Right.
in pursuing this.
Yeah, look, I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, it feels like I said, we've gone through these like multiple hype cycles. We've gone through these battles on VII and, classification and standards setting and everything like that. Even as this industry, around us has kind of continued to innovate. And it does feel to me like we're at a bit of an inflection point. That's a very biased statement, given I work for a company that wants to be at that inflection point. But I do think we are there. And it does feel like, this mix of vehicles indicating that they could benefit, combined with people like Lori and Greg who've kind of been working in this industry saying it's time now to really scale deployments. I mean, our company really, as I said, believes this is a platform or system problem. It's not a technology problem. I mean, if you kind of step back and say you look at sensing technologies in the last 5 years, huge advancement there. You look at obviously AI and software, massive advancement there. These two trends are kind of converging together to allow you to see everything on roadways, to basically use incredible computing power at the edge. And then obviously with this AI revolution to really crank out insights that nobody thought could be, observed or analyzed in that kind of time frame, millisecond latency. And so this is now real. It's now available. I think the big question, I think for the panel, and we'll go kind of around the horn a little bit, is, when you think about, benefiting road users today, benefiting road operators today, what are the biggest obstacles, Greg, that you're seeing? Why isn't it scaling faster? And then, given that most of the technology is coming out of the private sector, what are the partnership models that we're going to need to get this out there faster?
I'll try and tackle that question, Tyler, from a couple of different perspectives. So I think when you think about the barriers that we're seeing today, it is an environment where providers and solution providers can come, as well as auto manufacturers, and really start to do these kind of pilot deployments that immediately can scale. And so, that we're seeing pilots all over the country, all over the globe. But it's a matter of taking those to scale and making that decision. And so, we know, and look at some of the decisions we've made at THEA. We've very clearly said that we know that the roadway of the future, the system of the future, I won't just say roadway of the future, but the system of the future needs to be smart, it needs to be adaptable, it needs to be completely interconnected with each other. And when you're looking at an environment of just taking the roadway network that's owned, operated, and managed by multiple entities. And so it's about bringing that kind of connectivity together. What we've been trying to do is focus on that kind of information deployment to make those smart decisions. We're in a lot of different kind of ways, in varying stages of what we think that deployment is going to look like by increasing our sensors, increasing our ITS infrastructure, our data analytic capabilities, kind of bringing that all together. That's the backbone of our system. But we also believe that toll systems, the environment that we're in, are really uniquely positioned to be on the forefront. From a data perspective, we at THEA, we're looking at all of our technological systems beyond their intended capabilities to be able to be part of the data analytics platform as well. So, whether it's ITS infrastructure, tolling infrastructure, or connected vehicle infrastructure, we're looking at that as all parts of the puzzle outside of their original function to give us that 360-degree view of the use of our system and how it's functioning and how it's reacting. From that, you can build out sensors that are then communicating with signal systems that could be 3 and 4 ramps off of our system, communicating with venues around the city that are pushing out large amounts of pedestrians. These things that are all happening, making our system smarter, give us the ability. And when you throw AI on top of that, give us the ability to push forward. And if you look at why it's not happening, I think it's a little bit of trying to think about the short term and the long term at the same time, right? So, we know short term for us, it's about integrating that maximum amount of adaptability and involvement into our system, providing our customers with a maximum amount of information for a variety of means, so they can make safe choices. But, when you look at that mid to near term or long term, it's about making sure that we have the clarity for what that long term fully smart system is, but also mixing in how we adapt our system for that mix of vehicles, mix of technology, and being open to the new technologies. Long term, it's about being the safest, smartest system that we have out there. I tell our team, and sometimes they give me crazy looks, but in the end, we don't know what the system of the future is going to look like. But we have to start building it right now, regardless of what it's going to look like. We have to build that foundation today and really build that foundation in terms of sensors and ITS and connected vehicle infrastructure, and really stop thinking about them in silos and really thinking about them as a whole system of analytics and integration and connectivity through the transportation system, whether you're coming from rail to highway or from a mobility center to a pedestrian center. We've just got to really think about it in an interconnected way, knowing that our travelers are going to shift from hub to hub and really be able to track them from door to door.
Yeah, you said something there, and Andy, I'm going to go to you next, but you said something there that's really interesting around, and we all know the institutional difficulties of innovating in the government space. Governments own and operate most of these assets that we're talking about, and this kind of almost paralysis around, we want to solve for the future, but we got to solve problems today. That's too complicated. We can't pick the lane. I mean, it's almost like we're allowing ourselves to get tied into knots, as opposed to saying, let's make some bets here on what this structure could look like. And again, in a flexible way to allow additional use cases and everything. And so I do think it becomes a bit of an excuse to inaction, Greg, in my experience. Obviously, there are pioneers like you out there that are changing the game, but I do think leaders have got to really assert we're gonna take some bets here, and we're gonna figure out whether the future is what we want it to be or not. Andy, the question I have really for you, and you don't need to speak to why government doesn't act faster, because you guys got your head down trying to build vehicles of the future. But what is your sense of why this conversation between those making the most advanced vehicles in the world and those making the assets on which those vehicles run is not a better conversation? And I'll just step back and say, anybody who drives an interstate highway system, I can assure you it would not look that way if General Motors and Ford had not engaged at that point in history around what the interstate system could be, what it should look like. They were a major impetus. Everyone always talks about defense. I will tell you that's part of the story, but the whole story is that the auto industry engaged extensively on the assets on which their products were going to run at that point in U.S. history, and then that influenced the way roads looked around the world. That conversation still does not feel like the right conversation in the U.S. today. But what's your take on that, Andy?
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, I don't want to speak for the whole industry, but I think generally we are probably waiting for more clear standardization. As you think about rolling out an autonomous vehicle fleet for our customers, big fleets who own thousands of trucks, there's a lot of individual work that goes into adding autonomy to that fleet. You have to integrate dispatching, have to integrate operations at each hub, have to integrate the lanes, the routes, the routing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think adding V2X capabilities, especially if they're different across different jurisdictions, different routes, different endpoints, different arterial highways versus higher speed highways, it just adds so much complexity. So when you ask, should we be solving piecemeal use cases or should we be looking at a systemic operating system or systemic solution, I definitely lean toward that systemic solution. I think having standardization, having something that works not only for Forterra vehicles, but all autonomous vehicles and is standardized means that there's less integration work, and it means that we're able to scale quicker for our customers. And it just kind of eliminates that friction and that barrier. And I think when we're looking at safety case and regulation and technology adoption and all the things that we have to solve to scale autonomy, it's very challenging to add in having to integrate with different sensors in every single route that we want to go to.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, one of the things we've talked to the industry about, the trade association, is, can the industry support a set of, a feature set or levels of roadway? So, what does the roadway need to be able to do from a information accuracy, latency, coverage perspective, and have the industry assert a bit of, this would be great if a, advanced vehicle roadway could accomplish these things. We'd be very happy. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. There's a little bit of reluctance to kind of have that conversation. But I do think that auto industry in particular, along with, the L4 industry, could effectively put out, a white paper that says, if your roadways could do these things, we would take advantage of it and it would be helpful. I mean, we'll try. We'll work with you offline on that, Andy. Lori, I wanted to go to you.
That's a fair point. We'd love to talk about it.
Lori, what is your sense of, why is change not happening faster? Do we need more top down or do we need more bottoms up? Like, what's going to drive more change?
So I think I'm probably going to repeat some of the points that have been made, but I think that they bear repeating. Um, the idea of collaboration and coordination, I think, not just on kind of the information that we're talking about moving around and using to make better decisions, but also on, Greg is talking about this amazing pilot that they're doing, and it's great. So not everybody has to start from zero now, right? They can use the lessons and the learnings and the best practices that Greg has learned, and maybe for their roadways, if they have some sort of special topography or whatever, they only have to test a little bit. So you don't have to start from scratch. The whole idea of work smart and not hard, I think is really important here. I do think we have in government, we do feel a lot of pressure to solve the issues of the day, right? And that's that we we have a lot of pressure to just look at that. And it's really difficult to say, well, what about the future? And so when you get into those conversations, what I have found is really trying to move, especially on the IT folks whose job it is to protect the system and protect all the users of the system and any PII that may be coming into a government system, to move from the concept of risk elimination to risk optimization. And so I think there's also a mindset that can absolutely be felt from a top-down structure. So I do think having leaders at these different entities that change the culture, which is not easy, by the way. A lot of these much larger entities, it's like a cargo ship, right? You have to hit it like 1,000 times with the same thing before it starts to move. But we need people in there, not just at the top, but really throughout these organizations that start hitting it to really change the way we're looking at these projects. So it's not just what's in front of my nose.
Great. Awesome. Gopi, we got some good questions. I just reviewing now here in the chat room. So we'll turn over to those, Gopi. But what is your sense of the obstacles? Why, particularly from the OEM side, when you've worked with us obviously at Cavnue, but you've seen Ford and other OEMs interact in this space. Why is this not happening faster? You're on mute, Gopi.
I never mute my thing, so I always think
I didn't mute you, to be clear.
no, I don't mute, but generally when I mute, I don't know to get out. So I think the main thing, one of the barriers we have seen in terms of this data exchange, right? I think you've seen that, right? When we were talking about all these connected vehicles, when we're talking about the information exchange, there has to be, Lori brought that up in terms of the PII and other requirements that need to be taken care very right now, right? Because that is a enabler for being able to share the data. And then the first thing, right? So it's not about only infrastructure sharing the data. I see that all the vehicles, all the users should be able to share the data, take all that, and then be able to create information that is used by different people, whoever it is, right? And so there is one barrier is that we do not have a proper framework on which to share the data, right? Whenever I talk about, right, in some of the data panels, when we talk, it's like, what is the sharing of the data? It's like, they ask like, oh, we need all this. No, you don't. Just need to come out with what is that minimum set of data that everyone can securely share without revealing PII information or whatever it is. I think that at a system level, we need to think about how we do that. And then, right, from there, actually, it's like, the Tyler, you brought up actually, what are some of those use cases, right? In a way, day one use cases, let's define these are my minimum function the road should have or whatever, right? I think once we need to agree some of those critical functionalities and see how we need to collectively deliver to those things. Right now, we are running a little bit helter-skelter. It's like, does that make sense? This use case, does it make sense, right? I think we all need to collectively say, these are the things that make the valuable sense. These are the barriers towards data exchange. Let's take care of that. And then once those barriers are taken out, the innovation happens and the expansion happens on its own, right? So that's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, Gopi, you I don't know if you saw the question that actually one of the specific questions was really around interoperability. And Federal Highway has put out a roadway digital infrastructure program. I think ITS America has a paper on it as well. And this whole idea of how do we share information. I mean, I think implicit in the question from John is, is this enough? Do we need more standardization or technical thinking around that? I mean, Greg, I guess I would ask you, do you feel like you, as somebody who runs a massive road system and has run multiple massive road systems, that you have enough technical support if you wanted to really push a much bigger initiative in this area? Or do you feel like there's still a lot of work to be done there?
I'm laughing because I don't think it's a technology problem. I think it's really an area where, I mean, if you look at just the playing field that we have downtown here, I mean, we've got roadways that are owned, operated, and managed by the Hillsborough Expressway Authority, just like us. We've got a rail system that comes in. FDOT has roadways that come through and underneath of us. The county has roadways that come through and underneath of us. The city has roadways that come through and underneath of us. We've got signal systems that are operated independently by all three of those entities. And it's all just kind of, you try and coordinate, but it's not that single platform for that information sharing network. And I agree with John's question. The goal really is real-time situational awareness, a 360-degree view of the entire system, and building the platform where all that information is coming in and forming that 360-degree view. I can't get the view of my system or our customer base unless I understand what their journey looks like on the county road and the city road and the state road. And so we've got to build that in, because then I can use our infrastructure to communicate to them, use our infrastructure to intervene at the right decision points and those types of things to be able to make that system work. Because it really is about a system. And the challenge that I see, Tyler, and the panel is, as autonomous vehicles become more prevalent, that we are all going to become consumers of the same information, and we'll be able to make decisions for the users that the users are making today. We're all going to become consumers of that. But even despite advancements in integrating that technology, advancements in data infrastructure and information sharing, and even the promise of AI, it's important to recognize that humans are always that key component of how it's going to work. And so to safely and efficiently operate any transportation system, smart infrastructure becomes the basis for us as operators and the tools for us as operators to be able to make informed decisions or help our system make informed decisions that are going to benefit the user. But at the end of the day, it's all about people.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, very well said. I mean, Lori, what's your take on that question?
So I think that's really good. And I wanted to kind of get in here because my firm is one of those, and John, thank you for bringing that up. My firm is one of those that is supporting the FHWA and their DI effort. And I think the way the initial approach is looking at the transcontinental corridors, because like Greg said, you have to have all the interacting roadways actually talking to each other. So the idea is to have all the states along the corridors working together to come up with the thing, right? And then have that kind of layer out and have all the corridors then talk to each other as well, and then have that go into your arterials and urban areas and everything. And so I do want to do a shameless plug of if anybody's going to be at TRB, there is going to be a digital infrastructure workshop that Thursday at 9 a.m. I do not have the room number. I won't be there, but a bunch of my colleagues will be there. And I think if you are interested in these conversations, I think that's a great option to attend as well. So I think, Tyler, what you were saying earlier, right, is a top down, is a bottom up. I think it's probably both, and we have to meet in the middle.
Right, right. Absolutely. On the here's another question. I think for the Gopi Andy side of the panel, it says connected vehicle data could be the key to unlocking real-time insights at scale for drivers. What are OEMs needing in order to fully invest and collaborate with third parties to unlock these benefits? Why don't we start with Gopi?
Yeah, right. I think OEMs have been trying, right? Actually, you saw that GM was trying to share the data and work with Iteris or something, right? To play. I think the ability to, one complication was the ability to share that data. It's like, what is that data that needs to be shared that is useful was a difficult proposition. And then a lot of times it ended up weighing significantly expensive to be able to share that data, right? From the engineering of that data to be able to share versus the value that the OEMs were able to get from the data in terms of monetizing value or whatever that value might have been. I think it goes back to what I was saying. It's like, I think we need to make that pipeline easier in terms of being able to share the data, whatever is necessary, and also have that value proposition for whoever is sharing, right? Because anytime we ask a customer to share their data, they are only sharing because they see some value in it. So I think we need to work through that channel in terms of making it less expensive or less complicated to share the data and get more value for whoever is sharing the data. That becomes a framework for everything, right? Actually, but for the data infrastructure to come up and be really meaningful, that's where we need to take those barriers towards sharing out.
Great. Thanks, Gopi. Andy, we got another 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Gopi said. I think the other thing that bears mentioning is the safety case element of this. So if an OEM or level 4 or autonomous vehicle producer is relying on this data, how can they be sure that there's no latency, that they're getting the signals when they're supposed to be getting the signals? And as the OEM or the L4 is building their safety case, they need to really be confident in the robustness of the data. And so I think just understanding, getting a better clarity on how that handoff works is something that is challenging for vehicle and L4 producers, and is something that we need to collaborate on.
Great. So we have 1 minute left. I'll use moderator's prerogative to answer the last question. I said, what obstacles, and maybe Greg can pile on here or Lori, but what obstacles do procurement rules play? What obstacles do procurement rules play in the rollout of the ecosystem? I mean, my experience, they play extensive, both largely negative, if I'm being honest, largely negative role. And I think part of it is just the way government buys technology. I mean, I do think government has gotten a lot better at buying performance in lots of other areas. I think technology has always been a kind of a nervous area, mainly because I think government technology purchasers, particularly in the infrastructure space, this is not a largely technology-driven organization. It's starting to become that as we need to operate these assets more efficiently. And we've built this massive network of physical assets across all infrastructure. And now it's like, how do we operate them? So you're starting to see a change there. But when you contrast it to places like in the defense industry where you see technology firms really, pouring into defense to try to offer a variety of services. Our company, we encounter a lot of challenges because we want to sell a performance-based platform. We're not selling a software system or a sensor system. We're selling a system to way, Greg was talking about it, around specific outcomes, identifying roadway debris in, timeframes and accuracy levels, allowing or enabling traffic management responses. These are performance metrics that we would love to be judged by, but the way government procures, it's gotten more challenging, and it's more challenging than it needs to be. There are few pioneers, but we'll let Greg and Lori have the last comment on that one.
Yeah, the one thing I would share, Tyler, is really the two ways that we have found to operate within the framework of government procurement to make advancements. First is, every couple of years, we put an open solicitation out for emerging tech. And so we can go in there and I can shortlist 3 firms, or I can shortlist 3 providers, or I can shortlist 10 or 15 if we want to.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we put it out there and say, anybody that wants to work with us, anybody that wants to have a contractual relationship with us, anybody that wants to help us deploy and work with us on deployments, bring your solutions in and let us take a look at them. The other thing that we do is, as we're looking at grant opportunities, as we're looking at programmatic opportunities to get deployments out, we evaluate not only the solutions, but the resources needed to deploy them. And we really, through that evaluation, we put a team together prior to pursuing that opportunity. And so that really is part of the competitive process for us within the procurement is, hey, let's put a team together and let's work together on what this project looks like, or what this program looks like, or what this deployment looks like, and really solve that issue before we get kind of behind the 8 ball on getting wrapped around procurement regulations or things like that. Because it's really about finding the best and the most opportunity in solutions. We've very clearly laid out a role for us, and what we've said, our reversible express lane is a really unique asset for us. I can shut that thing down for 6 hours in the middle of the day and test, and just deploy and test. And we do that frequently. And so it gives us the ability to take a program or a solution from a solution, an idea, to a pilot, to testing, to deployment, to say, hey, this is really working well. Let's scale it for our system, a part of our system. And if it works, we'll share that information with everybody to scale that to other parts of the system throughout the world. So, we're just really being open about it, saying we're a test bed. Come see us if you want to try something.
Great. Lori, you got 20 seconds. We're over time, but any final comments there?
Yeah, I think it's another opportunity for improvement, right? Going from purchasing to innovative procurement. And I think there are, like you said, examples from around the country, especially in Texas has an innovative procurement entity that we in California use to help us think through some of the options. And what we started doing was, from the state level, we would put together an MSA off which local entities could purchase, but also entities around the country could also purchase. So just another way of breaking down those silos and not having to start from scratch.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. I really appreciate the time. Andy, Gopi, Lori, Greg, and ITS America. I really appreciate you all giving us this platform, and hope folks found it informative. This will be, I think, broadcast forever. I'm sure everyone will tune in every day to watch this over and over again. So thanks for joining, and we'll see folks soon. Take care.